termination and TNC agreements. Today, you can expect to learn about the success in SMS, how membership in SWAI has its benefits, how to work effectively through the grant process, aviation fuel tax revenue diversion issue, and we'll conclude the day with our future leaders, that's the students in the room, giving presentations. And those are just a lot of fun, so if you have some energy at the end of the day, please join us for that. It's one of my favorite parts of this conference. So with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the next session, Arpit. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So first of all, I would like to thank the session sponsors, Stantec and Delta Airport Consultants. Let's give a round of applause. So the session is about SMS. We all have heard a lot of sessions about SMS. I want to set the framework. This is not going to be talking about framework from a regulatory and policy perspective. This is going to be talking, Steve is going to be sharing his expertise and experience from Denver, more from a point of view of execution, coming from the trenches, what has worked, what has not worked, what are the gotchas you can avoid as you embark on this journey. Sooner or later, all of us, most of us in this room would have to do something about SMS. And that's the hope, that's the framework we are going to use. So having said that, let me introduce you to Steve. I'll go through his bio and then we'll get started. We'll leave all the questions for the end. We have enough time, and I hope there is enough questions from the audience to get the maximum out of Steve as he has come from Denver to participate in the conference. Steve leads, first of all, his title, Steve Thompson. He is Manager of Airport Safety. Steve leads a team of safety professionals at Denver International Airport, the 5th busiest airport of North America. His team is responsible for providing oversight and direction for airfield safety, construction safety, and employee safety. His leadership in these areas stems from over 20 years of experience in aviation safety. Steve is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, holds a master's degree in management from Webster University, and a certificate of management in aviation safety from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So let's give a round of applause to Steve and welcome him to the podium. And Steve, thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you, Arpit. And I am so darn excited about the Broncos being here in the Super Bowl, I'm not going to be able to stand still behind this podium, so I'm going to come down here and glad to see the support. After that real weak show of hands yesterday, I was a little bit concerned that I was the one and only Bronco fan here, but I'm glad to see that the entire community is kind of rallying around our cause. I'm really happy to be here this morning. I was going to try very hard to not tell any stories, but being that it's first thing in the morning, we probably still have some stragglers rolling in from last night, just to kill a little time before we jump into the meat of things. I wanted to share a quick little story with you, and I thought of this yesterday when I saw Perry Clausen. We all heard him speak yesterday. Is Perry here today? Great, because he can neither confirm nor deny the story. But basically, my brother-in-arms, Perry Clausen, as he gave his talk yesterday, I really started thinking about an experience that we had many, many years ago. And as you heard, Perry was a Top Gun graduate, Navy fighter pilot, and made some career changes later on. But I had the opportunity to fly alongside Perry many, many years ago. And during this time, I was flying C-130s, and I was trudging along on my C-130 straight and level, just kind of putzing through the sky. And here comes Perry, straight out of Top Gun school, pulls up on my wing, and he's flying his fast little single-seat fighter jet. Looked pretty cool. You know, my whole crew's looking out the window, and there's Perry over there. So our typical little Air Force-Navy rivalry, he kind of rocked his wings, and we started talking on the radio. And Perry said, hey, Steve and crew, take a look at this. Watch what I can do. He's right out of Top Gun school. He's got this fast mover, and we're putzing along. So Perry executes this absolutely precise barrel roll. Up and over the top of the airplane, comes down the other side. Just magical. I mean, those Navy guys really know how to fly. And he pulls it right back into our number 2 position on my wing there. And we're all going, man, that is so cool. And he's all beaming over there, you know, flips his mask off. And he's like, that's pretty cool. Let's see if you can top that. So now it's my turn. So as Perry's looking over to our cockpit, I think what Perry sees is he just sees me disappear from the window. And all of a sudden I'm gone. I'm not there. And a minute goes by, 2 minutes, 3, 4 minutes later, I actually come back and get in the seat. And Perry's flying over there, you know, trying to hold it steady, stirring the pot with his fighter jet. And he looks at me and he's like, Steve, that was not that cool. What did I miss? What did you do? And I said, well, Perry, I thought you could see through the window, but I got up, I stretched my legs, walked to the back of the airplane, used the bathroom, put a bag of popcorn in the microwave, popped a bag of popcorn, and 4 minutes later, popped back in my seat, sat down, and here I'm eating some popcorn. Let's see you do that. And so it was right there and then that I believe Perry made that decision that he was going to spend the rest of his career in the Air Force flying a much more comfortable airplane. So as you heard, he ended up retiring from the Air Force. And I do really think it was probably an event like that. For the record, that didn't really occur exactly like that. But I think it's probably an event like that that brought Perry over to the blue side. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you, a little bit of history. Sticking with those military days, I'll start with a real quick definition of integrity that was told to me many years ago, and it basically says integrity is doing the right thing when no one's looking. And when I look at SMS and when I started at Denver 2.5 years ago, we as a group decided that's what we were going to do. Okay, and that same exact definition really applies to people that are voluntarily implementing SMS today. It's doing the right thing. And a lot of folks out there, I've talked to some folks here even, they think it's so complicated and cumbersome, and until the rule says I have to, I'm not going to. But instead, we've made this decision that we're going to do some SMS things. You know, we're not maybe doing everything and not doing everything exactly by the book, but we've decided that SMS principles can really make things safer at our airport, and we are doing it because it's the right thing. There's nobody regulating us. There's nobody telling us we have to. No one's inspecting it. But we've already jumped full-fledged right into the SMS effort, and we're having some really good success voluntarily implementing SMS. As Arpit mentioned, just real quick, this is not going to be a theoretical discussion. There is plenty of information out there. You can go on the FAA webpage. It'll walk you through the mechanics of SMS. My goal today is not to educate you or bring you up to speed on the four components of SMS. We'll kind of briefly touch on those. But really it's more about what's going on in the trenches. What are we doing that makes our safety program look like SMS? And there's a lot of hesitancy out there to call your program an SMS. But as you'll see, a lot of these things I bring up, you might already be doing. Or maybe you've done it at another airport, or you have some shape or form of what I talk about already in existence at your airport. And I just want to show you that with that momentum, a lot of these things that already kind of smell or feel like SMS are very close to what the regulation will require when it comes out. So just for a little context, I totally get it. I'm from a really big airport, and 90% of the folks here are from small, medium, maybe GA airports. I just have to share some information about the scope of our airport, because it is different. We are huge, 53 square miles, 6 runways with room for 6 more, 30,000 badge holders. We have a lot going on at our airport, and it maybe some more, what's that, toll road? Toll road, soon to come, but not part of our SMS. But in any case, it's just interesting to note that we are in a great environment where some of these SMS pieces we're grabbing onto because we fight Mother Nature. We fight turnover problems. This airport is 20 miles from downtown Denver. When we get some of those poor folks in there making minimum wage to do some of the menial tasks, and then they find out they can get a job 20 miles closer to home, it creates turnover for us. So there's a lot of things that we battle when we start to try to build our culture, because we have a lot of continuity in our city staff, but some of our partners don't have that level, or they actually suffer from turnover a little bit. Large area to manage, a lot of concrete out there, especially when it snows, and we'll talk about that real briefly. But just for scope, I get it, that this doesn't necessarily look like your airport, and we'll talk a lot about how to make some of these things scalable. Some of the stuff that we're doing, we have a lot of resources. We have some money to throw at things. We have staff. We have a lot of good partnerships. But I'm going to try to talk about some of these things, and they can be scalable down to a staff of 3, 4, 5 people. We also have a lot of resources at our disposal. Like I said, we have a lot of people. I'm sure at some of your airports, your safety staff might be one person, or maybe even not a complete person. It might be one person wearing multiple hats. So I understand that, and again, I'm going to try to speak to that a little bit. But just some of the bullets here talk about what we have at our disposal, some of our capabilities. I will note the only bullet on there that's not backed up by hard data is that last bullet. But again, being that the Broncos are so close to winning the Super Bowl, I just have to put that on there. And you'll see that not just this week, not just because of the Super Bowl, we really leverage the beauty of having that Orange Crush team in Denver, and we've kind of made that, their color, that orange color, part of our safety culture. So we'll get back to that in a little bit. But go Broncos. Can I see any other Bronco fans out there still? 1, 2, I know got a couple reps, so all right. No jokes, no stabs. I mean, this is such a hard crowd. I usually talk to safety people, and we have a little more sense of humor when it comes to football. Somebody's going to throw something at me maybe, but feel free. Okay, so those are some of our capabilities, and I was going to omit this slide in the interest of time, but because my brothers and sisters at home right now are currently digging out of a snowstorm in Denver, I felt that I needed to put this up here just to pay some respect. In Denver right now, schools are closed. We've had a lot of cancellations, so right as we speak, people are digging out from the snow. So I just wanted to highlight that Mother Nature is one of our biggest threats. Another show of hands, how many people push snow out here on a regular basis? One brave soul. So that's exactly what I thought, so I won't stay on this topic too long. But I'm going to use it as a teaser because my goal is to tell you how or show you how we use SMS. So real quick, I want to use this as kind of a short little teaser about what SMS looks like at Denver International Airport. And I'm going to take you through slowly and methodically kind of through different phases of our program from a high level. But this is one quick little teaser that will show you SMS in action at our airport. We've been pushing snow for 20 plus years. Never had a fatality due just to snow. We do a good job keeping the runways open, so a lot of people would say, hey, Steve, we've been doing this for 20 years. What's your SMS going to do for us? I mean, we've got this nailed. We're one of the best in the country at moving snow. And I agree with that. I showed up and started work, and I thought, boy, this is incredible. You guys do a great job. But we've been able to use the tenets of SMS to really fine-tune some things. And I think a lot of operations out there, and I'll say this a couple times today, people are around kind of crossing their fingers, thinking, hey, we've crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and we're hoping nothing happens. But what SMS allows you to do is just kind of take it a step further. It's just instead of crossing your fingers, say, hey, we explored every potential risk out there and put as many to bed as we really can. And the quick teaser is, so again, we've been pushing snow for 20 years. Our maintenance guys working with the airlines are always looking for a way to get on and off the runway faster and to get fueled faster and get back to work. And they came up with a brainstorm this year at the request of the airlines that we're so big and our fuel farm is on the east side of the airport, and basically the guys fly on the west side, it just takes forever to go across and get refueled. So our maintenance guys came up with this brainstorm and said, hey, we're going to put a temporary fuel tank over on the west side and cut that time to refuel in half. That's going to be able to enable us to turn our snow plows that much quicker, keep our guys working, and not have that dead zone of about 30 minutes that it normally takes us to refuel. So great idea. Got the thumbs up from the maintenance director, and everybody said, this is what we're going to do. The neat piece is somewhere in that conversation, my boss and a couple other senior executives said, well, wait a minute, this is an operation that's going to impact our tenants. It's something we haven't done before. It basically, in their mind, they said this is a perfect candidate to do a risk assessment. And you'll see that in a risk assessment in our world, it's not this huge, drawn-out 4-day meeting all the time. We've got some different levels of conducting risk assessments. But it was music to my ears when my boss called and said, hey, Steve, the maintenance guys want to do this, but the leadership really, before they start, wants you to get your subject matter experts together and go through a quick risk assessment before we get to work on this. And that was great because, again, these guys are experts. They know what they're doing. But when we looked at their plan, we were able to poke some little holes in it. And, they didn't look really well at the lighting. I had a lighting expert that I could send out there and say, hey, what does this look like in the dark? Their operation was going to impact tenants. We wanted to make sure that our tenants could get to the refuel tanks to fill up with their chem. There were a lot of little things that, without going into detail, that we were able to just kind of poke holes in. And it's important to understand that the goal is not to put the brakes on a project. We are there to be an enabler. I come from a let's get her done background. Okay, my whole career has been about managing risk and getting things done. So we're not there to say, hey, you guys can't do that. This is too risky. Instead, we're there to say, hey, here's how you can do it a little bit safer. And so in my mind, that was a really good example of how our leadership really has found value in this risk assessment process. And they weren't afraid to let the safety guys stick their nose into it. They knew that we weren't just going to say, nope, just unsafe, we're not going to do it. They knew that we would poke out those few holes in it and find a little bit way to do the operation a little bit safer. So back to the big picture. Again, if you've got a staff of one, I totally appreciate that, but I just wanted to introduce you to our staff. And where we are at SMS is it's been about 18 months brewing, but I'm going to kind of walk you through what we've done to kind of massage our traditional safety program into an SMS. And again, this is going to look very different depending on the size and scope of your airport. But real quick here, we have I basically inherited a team of 4 folks, very much experts in the field. But they were industrial hygiene, occupational health. They were hired by the city of Denver to basically ensure the safety of our 1,100 employees. No aviation background. Absolute experts in the field, but they didn't know the first thing about aircraft go-arounds or icy runways. So what we've been able to do is to take these folks and really capitalize on their individual expertise, but also through training and awareness efforts, I've been able to bring them on board and teach them a little bit about SMS. So real quick, on the far left is Keith. He's our industrial hygiene expert. So he continues to look at employee injuries, for our city folk, but what we've done with his job is expanded it. He now gets to get involved with the airlines, and when they have an injury, we're all at the table. We're all talking. It used to be if a United employee got hurt, we never even heard about it. But now we are combining efforts, and we investigate their accidents from a facilitator standpoint, so we can learn why did that employee get hurt on the ramp, and what can we do to prevent other employees from getting injured. Mary, second from the left, she's our construction expert. We'll talk about risk assessments a little bit, but she is out there, boots on the ground with construction projects. And again, we're lucky to have a full resource to dedicate to that. Second from the right, Billy Joe, she runs our DOT, our CDL program, drug and alcohol compliance. We have over 500 CDL drivers at the airport, and she basically manages the records for that. So her piece is probably the least involved when it comes to SMS, but a very important part of our team. And then finally on the right, Ken, he came from an airline background, and he is our guy on the ramp. He's our facilities guy. He's out there daily talking with the airlines, investigating tug incidents, looking at things that the airlines have that we used to not put our fingers into, but now we're involved. So a great look at our team and the absolute experts that I was able to inherit and really put to work in SMS. And with an airport this large, I could not do it alone. Nobody could probably do it alone. You really have, to get it done with our scope, you really need a group of people behind you. So this is what we'll plan to talk about. Using my staff, we'll kind of run through a quick look at our safety culture, what that means. That's a big word that's being thrown around these days, so I'll kind of walk you through some of the things that we're doing to shape our culture. We'll talk about hazard tracking. We use ProDiGIQ as a great platform to track our hazards, to manage that work. You know, in the past, my guys and gals were out doing a lot of things, but there's not a real big paper trail showing where they made improvements. So I'll show you how ProDiGIQ and other tools are used by us to facilitate the data piece of it. We'll talk about the risk assessment piece. That's probably the most, I would say, scary piece when people start looking at it, but it's really the most actionable piece too. And I think you'll like how we, even at the giant airport, have taken this seemingly cumbersome process, but really made it the meat and potatoes of our program. And then finally, we'll talk about how we spread the word across our airport, and we really leverage that Bronco orange color. So this here, not actually how we get an airplane to the runway. And it's probably not one of the safest things that we do at Denver International Airport, but it is a great picture of a very diverse group of people working together to get something done. And I thought that it just kind of epitomized our village effect. And we have defined our culture to be everybody at the airport. And when the ruling comes out, you'll probably have some flexibility. It could be just airside that you look at. And depending again on your scope, you'll have to make that decision. But we have really made it a completely airport-wide effort. We have brought everybody, whether you're flipping burgers, driving a tug, or flying an airplane, you're part of our safety culture, and that was a very conscious decision. Two pieces of our village that have really enabled us to bring people together. First is our quarterly meeting. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have safety committees. We've been holding safety committees for years. I think when safety started, there was a committee right there alongside of it. But we have kind of reinvigorated our safety summit. It's a group of representatives from across the airport. We meet quarterly. We started off monthly, and it was overkill. People just, you know, they've got a budgeted amount of time they can devote to the airport-wide effort, and we respected that. So we went to quarterly meetings. But the neat thing is now we've become a round table of experts that talk almost daily. I mean, at least weekly, I'm talking to the Southwest safety guy who's giving me ideas that I plagiarize and use with the United safety guy, and it's all about sharing ideas, and they love that. And it's really neat when you walk into these quarterly meetings because the hats come off at the table. You know, nobody cares what airline you're from or what your contract looks like or if you're going to pick up a new destination, those kind of things that you don't want to talk about with the competitors. But when it comes to safety, this group gets it. And they know if somebody gets hurt with one airline, it's going to have a ripple effect and can really affect not just the other airlines in Denver, but the industry as a whole. So people are getting that. So that Safety Summit Committee is very important. The second event that we have is the annual safety seminar. This is a huge investment, and I know small airports probably don't have the resources to do this, but we're very blessed, and we do. And we do an annual safety seminar where we have grown this event to over 200 folks. It's in a room twice this size, about this many people, but well, I don't know how many are here today, but 200 people come together, and we talk all day about safety. We bring in expert speakers, okay? These guys are paid for a living. They come from all different areas of aviation, and we bring them in for a half a day of discussion about very theoretical safety things, and we provide some education and training to our group. Then we break it down and have little sessions. And the neat thing is that the ramp manager for Southwest, who's got guys throwing the bags, is going to be sitting at a table next to our regional NTSB director. And across the way from them will be people from our tower, FAA representatives, that are intermingling with maybe some of our concessionaire safety representatives. So it's just a really neat one-day event. Again, it's pretty expensive, but it's something that our leadership has decided we are going to show the community that we're willing to make this investment. And it's talked about across the industry. We had some folks from Florida come in this year, and we're really starting to grow it a little bit. It's not a conference like this. It's more of a very focused discussion. But it's an event that if you can do something like that, and at your airport, it might look like just an annual lunch. You know, maybe you get the 4 or 5 tennis together and you go buy them lunch or something, but it shows your commitment to a safer environment. None of that would be possible without the support of our senior leadership. Coming from Mile High, all this oxygen down here kind of gets me, I kind of choke on it a little bit, so bear with me, but kind of swimming in the air here. But all these events require the support of senior leadership, financially, resources, time, people. None of this will happen just because Steve wants it to happen. So we at Denver have outstanding support from our leadership, whether it's supervisors or all the way up to our CEO, Ms. Kim Day. And what I want to share with you here is a real quick video. She was not able to attend the event this year, but she filmed this introduction, and we showed this at our safety seminar this year, and it really does a great job kind of summing up how safety is looked at our airport from the absolute top of our organization.
Good morning. Thank you for gathering to discuss safety at Denver International Airport. I wish I were there to greet you personally. There's nothing more important than safety in the operation of an airport. And I can assure you, managing safety has the strongest support of our management team here at DEN. There are more than 40 organizations and teams represented there today. And to all of you, I'd like to say thank you. We appreciate your partnership and your participation. You know, none of us can do the work of improving safety without all of us contributing. That's why it's exciting to see you, our partners, gather, cooperate, and engage around such an important issue. This sort of gathering is not typical in our industry. I wish it was. But once again, with your help, we find ourselves on the leading edge of industry practices. Your proactive efforts to implement an airport-wide safety management system is helping to put DEN on the world map, which is one of our 7 strategic objectives. In fact, by contributing your thoughts and energy today, you're helping us fulfill at least 3 of our 7 strategic objectives, as this is also a prime example of partnering for operational excellence, leveraging the strengths of our partners and encouraging collaboration. And investments of our time and resources, and this and other safety-related events, will also help to inspire our employees. That should underscore the importance of this seminar. I encourage each of you to focus your energy and your expertise and explore new ways to take our safety to the next level. Please take today's information back to your teams and commit right now to make a difference in the months ahead. Remember, fly safe, work safe, live safe. Thank you.
Now that is one busy woman, and she has she's running a small city out there, 30,000 people, and when we have that level of support, that kind of commitment, and she's willing to sit down and talk, safety is not very often a real sexy topic. That people, if you don't hear from safety, that's usually a good thing because nothing's going wrong. So what Ms. Day has done is really helped us kind of glamorize safety a little bit, and of course she's a much more eloquent speaker than I am, so anytime we can capitalize on her as a leader, we absolutely do that. Another example is right here. Biggest event at DIA in the last couple of years is we built our big hotel and transit center. This is Ms. Day's pride and joy. She has an architectural background. She just really has loved that this project has come together during her watch. And as we watch this, safety on that construction site, we had people 14 stories up in the wintertime, in the dark. I mean, a lot of opportunity for injuries and even possibly fatalities on a project of that size. But when this is all said and done, at the end of the year last year, just in December, Kim listed the top 10 events in Denver, and this obviously was on that list. But I thought, when I read this, I thought, man, that is so cool. And I didn't ask her for it, but she here thought, you know what, they want to recognize that it's not just assumed, it's not just taken for granted that project was done safely, but it was. And she also emphasizes here, I apologize if you can't read that from the back, but she mentions how we give an award to that stakeholder, the company that was the prime on the project, and really acknowledges, though, that it was an airport-wide effort. And I'll talk a little bit more about that award, but But again, that is how it happens. And as you are sitting here as airport directors or senior ops people, I just want to drive it home that your poor safety folks are not going to be able to get the kind of traction that we have unless you can show that level of commitment. And again, I don't know what that looks like budget-wise or resource-wise, but this is why it happens at Denver, because we have this kind of support. So that kind of support gets the momentum, gets the inertia going. That's where we mobilize the whole community, that village I was talking about, everybody on board. But what about the rest of the folks out there? When it comes to that village, we have 30,000 people running around our airport wearing a badge, and we need to shape that culture. Pretty simple diagram, but I like to kind of just use this to compare to our workforce, and I'll throw some numbers out there. On a daily basis, say that big middle chunk, say that's 80% of our workforce. They get it. They come to work, they work safely, they go home with all 10 digits and in one piece, and they're doing what we want them to do. Very important piece of the population. We continually engage them through training. There's a lot of things going on. That group is the heartbeat of our operation, and they are working between the lines and then doing just what we need them to do. But what about those other two sides of the spectrum? You have some outliers there on that curve that you need to maybe focus a little more energy on. And at the top, we have our high performers. We want to celebrate their success. And on the bottom side, we have some folks that aren't quite with the program. We need a tool out there to bring them on board too. Because as much as I'd love to see everybody in that high performer area, the reality is you're going to have them spread across the board. You need to target all those areas. So what I want to do is share a couple programs that we have that have helped shape our culture and try to move that curve more to the right. The first is looking at that high end, the high performers out there. You have to celebrate those successes. So a big part of our SMS and the safety promotion piece of SMS is all about celebrating those victories. And I mentioned our hotel completed this year. We put together our first annual Stakeholder Safety Award that has to be given to one of our partners out there. And when we designed this, we really thought it would go to an airline. You know, it's all about aviation, and you know, it's one of those traveling trophies. Maybe it'll be United this year, Frontier next year. That was kind of the thought, possibly. But a neat thing was that this just happened to be the year the hotel got done, and our little committee that looked at this, I was not on the panel, but we had the FAA, some of my staff, you know, a whole wide group of folks that looked at all the candidates and basically centered on this hotel project and said, yeah, you know, they don't really fit the aviation box, kind of like the award was designed for, but this hotel had results. Man, they came in and they beat the estimates for injury costs, for workers' compensation. They also partnered with the airport. This guy on the left there, Mac, he came to all of our summit committee meetings, and he got up in front of the airlines and said, here's how we do toolbox talks out there on that construction site. Here's how we're keeping my guys safe. And he was just an outstanding partner. But long story short, that award went to them and allowed us to celebrate that success. The value of the award didn't end there because we had a lot of honorable mention. It allowed us to share best practices. We had a couple airlines and even one of our catering companies that were able to use this, and we were able to recognize them, not necessarily give them a trophy, but say, hey, let's recognize some of your successes and share that with the rest of the community. The other piece, much less formal, is our individual awards. And in the last couple of years, we've given out, I believe, around 140 certificates to folks that are just going a little bit above and beyond. This doesn't require a big nomination process. It's basically a phone call to our office saying, hey, I've got this employee and here's what they did, and in about 3 seconds we can decide whether or not we think it's worthy of recognition. But we'll go over during a staff meeting, shake some hands, and hand out these certificates and oftentimes a gift card as well to thank an employee that goes a little bit above and beyond. These are employees that maybe go the extra mile in battling fraud. We awarded one of the airline employees that really kind of created or streamlined how wildlife strikes were reported in their maintenance hangar. We had a gal that had an issue with her department. They weren't wearing safety vests out on the ramp, so they came up with this program where they were trying to catch each other, and whoever got caught the least ended up with some kind of award, like a gift card or something. So these are individuals that are just really leveraging what we want to happen with the culture, and they're out there making it happen on a daily basis. But we call it getting caught in the act. And we sent that first email out to introduce this program. Everyone got scared. Here comes safety. They're going to catch us. But it's really getting caught in the act of doing something above and beyond for safety. So it's been an outstanding tool and really helped us kind of move the needle when it comes to safety promotion and have our culture seen as a positive momentum. Back to the piece. Now you have also this side of the equation, the low performers. These are folks that somehow engage in non-compliance with rules, policies. Sometimes it's an honest mistake. Maybe they didn't know the rules. Maybe it's intentional non-compliance. Maybe they're taking shortcuts. There's a whole variety of reasons why people don't get it and don't stick with the program. But we needed a mechanism to deal with this part of the population as well. So what we devised was we called our infraction accountability program basically a point system. And this really applies to the safety assurance piece of SMS, of the 4 pillars I promised not to talk about. But the safety assurance piece is where you're out there making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And through this program, we really collaborated with the airlines to come up with a program that worked for everybody. We talked to a lot of other airports. Some airports have fine systems. Other airports use their security program to enforce rules and regs. We spent almost a year digging into making this program work for the airlines, because we knew they were going to be the biggest criminals out there, if you will. The folks, they had a lot of folks that weren't following the rules necessarily. But they got on board and said, hey, this point system sounds kind of cool. And in a nutshell, and I'd love to share information, a lot of airports have talked to us about the mechanics of this, how does this work? But what we basically did is took all the safety rules out there, kind of put them in categories, and then assigned point values. And very much like your driver's license, if somebody has an infraction, and our ops, we have a whole cadre of folks that can issue these citations, but if they're smoking in the wrong place, not wearing a reflective vest, running a stop sign, whatever the safety violation is, they get tagged with a point value, 3 points, 4 points, 6 points. And at that point, we leave it to the company. I send a letter to their safety manager and say, hey, Bob Smith got a violation for this, and we leave it to the company to manage their people. Okay, it's not a one foul and you're out. It's not meant to hammer anybody. It's just a tool to help and allow companies to manage their own people. If the employee accrues 12 points in 12 months, however, then we do get involved. So they come back and have a little administrative discussion with me, and we kind of talk about, hey, why do we have a repeat offender here? What's going on? So we've kind of made it a very progressive approach to discipline. But what it's done is given a great tool to our ops folks. It's put some teeth. And when I got there, I thought, man, we have all these rules and regs, and how do we enforce it? And occasionally we would take someone's badge if it was bad enough, but there was really no trail of how we were enforcing our rules. So this has really become a great program to make sure that our folks are out there doing what they should be doing. And it's been something that we built with collaboration. Everybody's on board. It really works for everybody. This is the kind of data we get. I was going to put up our dirty laundry, and we can break this down to many more categories, but I thought for the ease of this discussion, this basically just shows the number of violations written, not real useful information, but when we break that down by the type of violation, the location on the airport, the business that was involved, this has become very actionable information. And we now, in every one of our committee meetings, we talk about this. We slice it and dice it, and this is where we focus our training. This is where we increase our presence. If we've got an area of a certain concourse where rules are being broken, we can put more people there to try to get people on board. And again, it's not meant to be a hammer. My guys don't get paid any extra for writing a whole bunch of tickets. There's not a quota that they have to fulfill, but it gives us some really actionable data. Okay, very, very useful pieces of information that we're able to glean from this. That's a little bit reactionary. Now I'm going to move on to some of the proactive pieces of our safety management system. This right here, kind of a busy slide. This has all kinds of information for our workforce about what our capabilities are in our department. The most important piece for today, though, is there's a link up here for reporting hazards. So the point system is reactionary. Somebody's done something wrong, we capture that, we take care of business. This piece, though, is now, hey, we've got some hazards out there, and we want to report them. And it's very important to have some easy way for your employees to report this information and for you to track it. A lot of folks are out there using spreadsheets, and those spreadsheets, they kind of fill the bill, but we've been able to now instead make this a portal into our ProDiGIQ platform where people go in, they click on that link, and up comes the ProDiGIQ portal form where they can enter information for hazards. This allows us to kind of tailor the information that we collect. It's also very timely. Press the button, it's there. Okay, it's not one of those things that takes weeks for us to find out about. And it also helps us to be accountable for addressing some of these hazards. Another pathway is via this QR code here. So when I got there, we had all these bright yellow safety suggestion boxes hanging all over the airport. Great receptacle for cigarette butts and gum wrappers. You find everything in there except good safety ideas. So we ripped them off the wall and said, hey, now there's a big spot on the wall. What are we going to do? So we came up with this sign here where people can actually scan that QR code with their device, and it instantly, again, becomes a portal into our system. We then take that hazard data into ProDiGIQ and are able to manage it better. And for the less tech-savvy, we also put our email address on there as well, because we really want to make every employee feel that they can get into our system, whether they have a QR code or they want to send us an email. Of course, we still take phone calls as well, but the key is you really have to open up the doors, open up the floodgates so people can get information into your system. once we have that, this is a dashboard shot. Doesn't become real meaningful until you drill down into a little bit more fine view of the airport there. But it allows us to now look at some events that previously might have occurred in isolation. When we start plotting things on the airport, we can say, hey, maybe Delta had an issue over here, but in isolation, it didn't seem like a big deal. But at that same intersection, we're having a report from Southwest and from other airlines that maybe they're saying, hey, you know, when you start to look at the aggregate data, it really paints a picture of the airport and is, again, actionable data for us. Just kind of a gee whiz other dashboard here, but this, again, makes us accountable. Now, we early on decided that we wanted to be an airport. It's really easy to stick your head in the sand and pretend everything's fine out there. You know, hey, we're an airport. There's nothing to worry about. And we don't want to know about it if there is hazards out there. But we worked close with our legal staff and close with our risk management staff, and we all came together and said, we would rather know what the hazards are out there and be able to show that we are actively managing them. You know, it's really easy to say, oh, we didn't know about that. You know, sorry that person slipped and we didn't know. But instead, we are capturing this information, and we feel very comfortable that we can say we're addressing it. We know about it, and we're taking action. Another point when you start collecting this kind of data, it kind of looks like before July we had no problem, right? Well, just be aware when you start asking for information, you might get that data explosion. And don't be alarmed, because this now is just better reporting. As people become familiar with the system, as they feel comfortable telling you about problems, you're going to see that uptick in data. And that's nothing to be alarmed about. In my book, that's kind of a success, because it gives my folks a lot more things to work on. So here's the risk assessment piece, safety risk management. Some people call going through this process doing an SMS or doing a safety risk management panel. There's a couple different terms used today. But this is where the rubber meets the road. This for us is where we've really had some great advancements, and I want to kind of take you through a couple of examples of how this has been successful at our airport. So at first look, if you've done some reading, sounds a little bit cumbersome. It can be a 5-step process. Somewhere you'll see a 6-step process. But one thing I like to share when I get folks in our airport involved in a risk assessment, I go back to about 15 years ago where back in the Air Force I had a chief of safety, and he was tasked with this new concept the Air Force came up with called ORM, Operational Risk Management. And here you had a bunch of Air Force pilots that fly into combat, fly during bad weather, sometimes unproven equipment, take a lot more risks than the Navy guys do. But all right. Do we have some Navy out there? Very good. But in any case, this really sticks with me because it helped me embrace this new risk assessment concept, very similar to what SMS is doing today, operational risk management. But he was tasked with explaining this new cumbersome process to the Air Force pilots. And you know they like a lot of pictures, and it needs to be kind of simple. And so without offending anybody, this man was very successful in dumbing it down is not the right word, but I just said it. So he wanted to make risk management simple for our pilots. And basically what he came up with was a small card, and the card said, number 1, what's out there that can hurt you? Number 2, how can it hurt you? Number 3, is there anything you can do about it? And number 4, what are you going to do about it? So in a nutshell, 15 years ago, that's how the Air Force was looking at it. Now today in SMS, very similar concept. Instead of being reactionary, instead of waiting around for the phone to ring so we can run out and investigate an accident, we can now look at triggering events, big projects at the airport, I'll kind of get into that, but different events that mobilize us to say, hey, we've had enough accidents. We know what can happen. We know what can go wrong. Let's sit down and try to anticipate those as much as possible. So in that same sense, it's looking at what can hurt you and what you can do about it. So it's very simple. So don't be intimidated by this long process. But very quick, taken right from the FAA's guidance, the 5 steps, just to kind of get everyone on the same page, is basically you get your subject matter experts together. And again, depending on your scope, for us, this is 20 or 30 people. We bring in the fire department, depending on the issue, we bring in a lot of experts. At your airport, it might be 2 or 3 people sitting together. So I get that. But you want to get the subject matter experts in there, describe the system, talk about what this triggering event is. So real quick, that event can be a construction project. Obviously, that's probably where you hear about risk assessments the most. But also, you bring a new type of equipment onto the airport, an A380 coming on board. That's a big change to the airport. Any kind of operational procedure, an air show at your airport, any event can trigger the need for an SRA. But the describe the system process is where we all make sure that everyone's working with the same amount of information. Next step is brainstorming. Well, that's the what can hurt you piece. Okay? Think of a hazard. A hazard is ice on a runway. By itself, not a big deal, but that ice on the runway is a hazard. The next step is looking at the most likely negative outcome. What's the credible threat out there? So that ice on the runway by itself, not a big deal, but as soon as you land an airplane on it, well, that's what can happen. It can slide off the runway, and is it likely that that airplane is going to slide and hit 4 more airplanes and have this catastrophic event? Probably not as credible, but the chance that it could slide off and cause some damage, you want to look at for your airport what is really credible. Then we quantify it a little bit. We assess the risk, and I'll show you the red, green, yellow diagram that hopefully you're familiar with here in a second, but we try to put kind of a qualitative assessment to that risk. And then finally, what can we do about it? What can we put in place? What can we do instead of just doing more of this? And we're good at this because we've got a very good success rate, and we do a lot of crossing our fingers, but what can we do now possibly to reduce that risk even more? This is the worksheet that we use, and we basically, bless you, we use this to step through the process, and if you've done any diving into risk assessment, you may see some really busy worksheets. I've seen worksheets up to 14 columns, and these can be cumbersome. And sometimes if you've been on a risk assessment, anyone in here sat on a risk assessment? Hopefully one run by the FAA because they're very well structured. Those can be 2-3 day meetings. They can be very long. We decided at Denver if we want this process to really work in all those different situations I talked about, we came up with this worksheet, and if you can't read it in the back, it basically just kind of steps us through those steps. We talk about the different hazards. This is brainstorming. That ice on the runway goes here. Possible effect. What can happen due to that hazard? That's where the airplane slides off the runway. The existing controls, okay, again, we've been doing this for a long time. There are a lot of things out there to prevent those bad things from happening. This is where we can list snow plows, chemical de-icing, the NOTAM system, Pyrex. There's a million things out there to really minimize the chance that an airplane is going to slide off the runway. So we acknowledge that. We're not starting from scratch here. There's already a lot of things in place. Then as subject matter experts, we come up with a risk level, which we'll talk about in a second. And based on that risk level, is there anything else we can do to make it a little bit safer? All right, the goal is not to eliminate hazards, it's to manage hazards. And when your group gets that, they'll be a little bit less afraid of this process, because the goal, we all know that the safest thing to do is park the airplanes, turn off the lights, and go home. That's not the goal here. It's to manage that risk level to as low as we can possibly can. This right here is our chart, green, yellow, and red. Hopefully you've seen this somewhere, but this is going to be a big tool that your risk assessments can use. And what we have is each airport needs to define its risk level, but basically we don't want to operate over here. If it's a high risk, that means somebody's going to get hurt. We're going to bend some serious metal and probably have some fatalities. The yellow area, that's medium level of risk, and that's okay to operate in, depending on your appetite, as long as you are managing those hazards. And then finally the green area here is say, hey, there are so many good mitigations already in place, there's already controls in place, that really, this is probably something we don't want to spend millions of dollars on to make it green a little bit more green. But if you've never seen this, please take a look on an FAA website and kind of help yourself understand how we rank likelihood and severity of an event. And those subject matter experts at the end of the meeting have to kind of come up with some decisions here. And it's a very subjective process. You're going to have some outliers. You're not going to get all 20 people to agree that a hazard belongs right here. And we've had a lot of real healthy discussion. But at the end of the day, you just kind of be a little conservative, and we plot these hazards, whether they're low, medium, or high. And again, the goal is not to, everything doesn't have to be green. At Denver, we land airplanes all night long in the middle of a snowstorm with 10-knot crosswinds. I mean, that's a yellow activity, but it's managed. We do that safely. And I'm not out there trying to make it green. Okay, I am. I'm doing, obviously the safety people want to make it as safe as possible. But the goal is to just manage the hazards as best we can. So this probably, if you ask me where we really realized our first success, last spring we conducted our first in-house safety risk assessment. And I walked out of this meeting, walked down the terminal, and my boss passed me with this big grin on my face, and he said, Thompson, what's going on? And I said, boss, we now have an SMS. And it was pretty cool because we walked out of this meeting, and it was those 20 subject matter experts I talked about, and they got it. They were very participative in this meeting. They felt that we gained some traction on this construction project, and we walked out of there with a new cadre of folks that really embraced this process. Just in a nutshell, it was a rehabilitation project on an outboard runway, so it didn't really nicely fit all the criteria that the FAA has for doing one. Because it was an outboard runway, a lot of their haul routes and the construction traffic didn't necessarily impede the other runways. But we used it as an exercise to say, hey, let's dig into this project, and instead of doing this, let's see if there's a couple things we can do to make it a little bit safer. Construction projects in general, there's kind of a sweet spot, somewhere between the 30 and 90% design phase. If you do it too early in the process, you haven't given your experts, your construction or your design people, an opportunity to really address the hazards. You want to give them a chance to do their work because for the most part, they're going to give you a pretty solid plan. And if you do it too much later in the process, then it's kind of late. It's hard to get those things built into the contract. The last thing you want to do is go to your maintenance division and say, you got to put that out for rebid because we came up with all these hazards we need you to address. So somewhere between that, we kind of have found between the 60 and 90% design phase is a really good place for us to stick our nose in, look at the planning that's been done to this point, and we look at haul routes. We look at FOD control programs. We look at emergency response. Was this construction going to impede emergency response to other areas? We look at response to hazardous weather. So all these guys working out on the runway, when we get a tornado warning, where are they going to go? They're going to end up running across that inboard runway I talked about and creating a hazard. So it's all those things that as we do more and more of these, they're going to get incorporated earlier and earlier in the process. But even if you've been doing construction for decades out there, there's oftentimes something that by digging in, you can kind of find those little holes and get them changed before it's too late in the process. So after that event, we walked out of there with that cadre that I was talking about. They got it. I spent a good 15 minutes up front explaining the process, getting them on board, introducing that green, red, yellow diagram so everyone knew what we were going to do in the next couple hours. But we got the subject matter experts in there. We did our homework ahead of time, and they walked out of there thinking, hey, we just found 2 or 3 things that need to be addressed before we break ground out there. They bought into the process. Totally different scenario here, because I don't want SRAs or safety risk assessments to be limited just to construction projects. So here, totally different scenario. We had the Colorado National Guard bring a whole squadron of F-16s over last summer. And again, this had been done 6 or 7 years earlier. Nothing happened. It was done safely. Our guys thought, rock on, we've got a plan. Let's just activate that same plan. But true to fashion, we got our experts together again. And we started digging into some things. When you talk about an F-16 operating on our civilian field, they carry a chemical in their APU called hydrazine, very, very toxic to our firefighters, something that they never really thought about with previous deployment. They have ejection seats. So if one of these airplanes goes into the dirt and my firefighter goes running up there to save the guy, does he know how to safe that ejection seat? Okay, something that our guys just not a part of their normal training. Formation taxi procedures, FOD by that gigantic jet engine that's sitting 3 feet off the ground, another hazard. So there's a lot of neat things that we were able to dig down to just to make this deployment a little bit tighter. Interesting thing, the FAA actually did an SRA on this. And I went to that and I participated, and it was a great discussion. But they looked at everything from 2 feet above the concrete and onward. They were concerned about these fast movers in the traffic pattern. They were concerned about departure and arrival procedures with formations. They were concerned about how do we let these guys do an unrestricted climb so they can point it straight up. So the FAA looked at those things. But then we walked out and said, hey, there's some other things happening in the non-movement and movement area that we probably ought to take a look at. And we were able to do that successfully. And again, it wasn't putting the brakes on. We wanted those guys coming over. But we just found probably 6 or 7 different little things that we could, we installed a FOD fence in one location where these guys would taxi out, park to get their armament done, and realize that when they juice it again to get rolling, they were going to create some FOD on an adjacent taxiway. So just little things like that this group was able to come up with, but very proactive, very productive. So real quick, some other applications. It's been a great process, and if you take nothing else away from today, take a look at that risk assessment process, because that is the actionable piece. And again, if you don't, many of you will never be required to have SMS because of the size of your airport, but there are pieces of it that you can grab onto to make your operation a little bit safer. And the SMS allows us to have programs that look kind of similar. So when you go, just like a pilot lands at one airport, he wants those pavement markings to look just like he does at the airport he took off from. Same thing with safety programs. As our, we talked a little bit about professional development. As people move from airport to airport, it'd be kind of neat if a safety program at one airport looked very similar and had some of the same tools at a different airport. But these are just some applications where we've done risk assessments again, in no way limited just to construction projects. Irregular operations or hard standoffs, we did a risk assessment, made sure we had access for folks in wheelchairs, and just, a lot of things we can look at there. Taxiway, sign install, magazine storage. This is really interesting. This just happened a couple weeks ago. Had a proposal from downtown. They wanted the cops wanted to move some magazine storage, some explosives over to the airport. And at first look, it's like, oh, no way. We're not going to do that. And senior leadership had a lot of things to consider. There's a political impact. There's the real estate impact, and they also thought, hey, look, we need to have those safety guys run one of these risk assessments and make sure we're not going to blow anybody up. And the neat thing is, When we walked out of there, it was all green. Okay, these folks are experts. They've been storing explosives, and it was not a large amount, a very small amount, just for training, really. But we were able to go to senior leadership and say, hey, you have a lot of things to consider, but because our Denver Police Department is so well trained, they have procedures, they have containers, we vetted this thing up and down and said, hey, we're good with it. There's a little risk involved, but those guys are professionals. They know what they're doing, and we're not going to put the brakes on your project. So it was kind of cool to hand them a green slate from the safety perspective. I talked about the fuel tank example, ASRS reports. Instead of one or two ops guys responding to that, we had one come across the desk, and we said, hey, let's get people in a room, and let's really vet this thing. We had one pilot, didn't like an intersection, and man, we tore that thing up and down with a risk assessment, and really were able to give a very conclusive answer to our boss. And then finally, that point system I talked about, as we get more and more data, we're going to start to see those pain points, where those isolated incidents no longer isolated. We're going to use those points, those pain points, or those common problems to possibly run a risk assessment. I'm going to need to speed it up here. Just wanted to touch on the promotion piece. So that, everything I've talked about so far, you've got a good involvement from people involved in safety. But again, we want to reach all 30,000 people. And in Denver, you see safety orange. And anywhere west of the Mississippi, you ought to be thinking about the Denver Broncos. And we have people now, when they see the orange Broncos, they're thinking about safety. And so we've kind of latched onto that. And what we've done to create a little bit of camaraderie, and this didn't happen just because of the Super Bowl, but a year ago we started handing out these lanyards, and all over the airport, you're not seeing United lanyards, Southwest lanyards. You still do see that, but now a lot of those folks are wearing our Denver. We're one team, one fight, United in orange, and it wasn't an accident that this came out in Broncos colors. So those can be fighting words on the ramp sometimes, but we go out and we basically, I'm trying to get the policy signed by Kim, but we want to make sure that no other sports teams can be on people's lanyards. It has to be safety orange. I don't want to see this black and yellow colors out there anymore. So in any case, it's really done wonders to kind of get people on board and understand that it's not just their company's silo, it's actually an airport-wide community. So a lot of things we're doing out there to reach that community. I'm not going to show the video, but I had two clips here that kind of talked about our training program. We have 1,100 city employees. I get a lot more face time with them than I do with those other silos I talked about. So if it's a city employee, I can get their undivided attention for a 30-minute training, a 2-hour training. So we had, what I was going to just show here was an introduction video of how my boss gets on and talks about personal accountability. We want those 1,100 employees to feel part of our community. So very, very impactful training. But we also have that larger population, those other 30,000 folks out there. So we were able to, with our Side Badge training and working with AAAE, we were able to create a training video that reaches that entire population. So it's really neat. It's obviously there's a couple hours of security training before they get their badge, but they've allowed us to piggyback and got a couple minutes of programming. And I want to emphasize that all this training, nowhere in this training does it try to make you an expert on SMS. The goal is not to have people walk out of that video and recite those 4 pillars or tell you what the 5 steps are, SRA are. That to me is not a good use of the time. Instead, it teaches people that they're a part of the culture. It teaches them how to identify a hazard, how to report a hazard, how to fix that hazard on the spot, okay? Because a lot of those people out there working for you, they can fix things right there. So we use that training time to just get people in the culture. Again, the goal, it's not to make them SMS experts. And if the FAA comes out and talks to someone on my ramp and they don't even know what SMS stands for, I don't see that as a failure. But if that person's wearing their safety vest and doing things safe, and you watch them go over and pick up a tin can bouncing across the ramp, that is what I need those people to do, not to be able to recite SMS. Leave that for my group. But in any case, that's our airport-wide training. So real quick, that's what we talked about. Define the scope of your village. You decide, is this going to be just your team, 3 people? Is it going to be airside only? Is it going to be airport-wide? But just define who belongs in your village and then mobilize that village. Get people on board. It's not going to happen overnight, but just start talking the talk and get out there, and those folks become your eyes and ears. Your key players will be your stakeholders and people on your staff. Plan for that data explosion. A lot of people say, show me the numbers, and you've got to have a way to capture hazards. And I've had a couple graphs I'll show if we need to, but there are a lot of metrics out there that can be used. The number of ground incidents per 1,000 movements is something that we use to track over time to see how we're doing against the industry. employee injury rates. There's a lot of metrics out there that you already have that over time you can start to use to validate your SMS efforts. All right, so that is my agenda, and appreciate you bearing with me, but I think we're at the point. Any questions?
Excellent presentation. Let's give a round of applause to Steve. Well, let's see if anyone from the audience have any questions. I do have some questions for Steve, but I'll give the audience a chance if anyone has any questions. Well, Steve, let me ask you a couple of questions. I was sitting over there and listening to you. Some great steps you're taking towards promoting and developing the culture of safety at DIA. How do you measure the success? That's one thing that I was sitting there and continuously thinking. Could you talk a little bit about how do you keep the program accountable and measure success?
Sure. So I kind of touched on that at the end there with the metrics. You know, you have to, at the end of the day, find some metrics. But for early success, just looking at the participation, the number of people that are coming to our risk assessments, the people that show up at those committee meetings. I talked about that risk assessment that I walked out of with that big grin. That, to me, was a measurement. It's very subjective, but a measurement that our thing was in motion. Safety is hard to measure. I can't always tell you how many lives we saved or how many accidents we prevented. It's hard to put a number on that. But instead of doing this, I've got a staff that's out there 10 hours a day, and we can say, hey, we looked at that construction program. We added 3 flaggers. We changed the haul route. We added this. We required trucks to be covered. That stuff I can put my hands on, and again, not say how many aircraft engines I saved, but say, hey, we did something. Another thing is you can't walk on our ramp anymore and find someone not wearing a safety vest. People are starting to get it. I mean, it's almost a contest to try to find a guy or a gal not wearing a safety vest. So that, to me, is an indicator. Those metrics I talked about, very important. But 2 things with your metrics. As you start asking for that information, again, don't fear that uptick. When people start to report, you're going to start hearing about more things you didn't hear about. Doesn't mean you're having more problems. It just means that you're more aware of it. And I guess that's a couple of examples. But if anyone's interested, you can certainly ping me afterwards, and I can share some very specific examples of some of the metrics we use.
Very good. Gladys, you have a question?
So I know you spoke about the culture and then having people not police or self-police or whatnot, but how do you also work on or approach the adverse effects too of culture and team morale when they feel that there's that reporting system in there, especially when the results say that we have an increase of issues? You know what I mean? Because a lot of the times what happens is people get down on themselves or they start feeling like, you know, I keep getting disciplined and I can't do anything right. Even though it's all about safety, you also want to keep that employee retention there too.
So that's exactly why we spent an entire year coming up with that point system to try to make that fair. And every time I talk about the point system, so in the last year we gave out maybe 100 citations, but we gave out over 200 certificates of appreciation. So we're out there looking at that both sides of the spectrum. It's just a necessary evil. You've got to have some way to, if you're going to have rules, you have to be able to enforce it. And I'm all about, I want to be out there shaking hands and thanking people. I don't want to be out there writing tickets. That definitely has a negative connotation. But you have to have something in place. And the deterrent value alone has paid great dividends for us. You know, we don't have to be out there writing tickets, but now people know if they don't wear their safety vest, they can get a 3-point violation. They're not going to get fired, but they're going to talk to their boss about it.
So with that said, I think sometimes too what will happen is the person is hesitant, like especially in the very beginning of when you're implementing it, they go, you know what, man, it looked like we made a mountain out of a molehill right now, and so how likely am I to go and report other things? And I said, well, I always tell them, I said, yeah, but you have to understand it's in the eyes of safety, you know, and your job is dependent on that. And if you fail to do that, it's very difficult. And so I just have to walk them through that, and it takes a lot of human capital, you know, yourself or your staff, and so what type of support system and structure is there for that? In your own, did they, you know, when you guys developed that program, did you notice that you had to have more of that human capital in there? You know, did you have to take on other employees, or because you do the way you do the system, everybody became a part of that program?
Absolutely. So we didn't have we have a lot of resources, but we couldn't go out and hire a bunch more people. Instead, my people don't sit in the office anymore waiting for the phone to ring. They are out of that office, and they are out on the ramp and making that presence. And we have very slowly moved that perception, that needle, to say, hey, safety's not out here to bust me. They're out here to make my job safer so I can go home to my family. And I'll be the first to tell you, that is a big pendulum to swing. That does not happen overnight, and you have to claw just to move that a tiny bit, to move that, to gain that trust. So you hit it on the head. It's a big effort, but if you don't start somewhere, and I think we've been successful. That people, I'll walk up to a group of smokers that are smoking in the right area, and I'm handing out these lanyards. And they're all kind of like, ooh, here comes the safety guy. I'm handing out lanyards saying, hey, thanks, guys, for smoking where you're supposed to. Tell your buddies the same thing. And we have very slowly moved that needle where we're no longer seen as, hey, here they come, let's all scatter. Instead, they're like, hey, there's that safety guy. He's going to give me a coin or a lanyard or something that we can celebrate. So it takes a very concerted effort. It's nothing, it's very true. Safety has a negative connotation. And again, it's just about getting out there and making people believe that this is their future. We had recognized an airline employee running around picking up FOD, and I stopped and I said, come here, buddy, what motivates you? And he said, this is my future. If that Airbus pulls in and sucks in that can, there goes my profit sharing or my retirement or whatever. And I thought it was music to my ears. And the goal is to get every employee to start thinking that way. And you're always going to have people on the other end of the spectrum that are just mad, upset, looking for a job. When you talk about the numbers like we have, you're always going to have some of that. But we really focus on the bigger side, and we're out there passing out certificates, shaking hands, and not handing out cigars. So.
Richard?
Thanks. I'm Richard with Los Angeles County, but my hometown as of 13 years ago is Fargo, North Dakota, so I know cold. And as a result of that, I noticed your line chart that you had up there with the tallying the infractions, and that it seemed to increase sharply as the weather warmed up, and it dropped off at the end, of course, as you got into the November and December timeframe. Is that something that your team recognizes, and do you tend to ramp up your programs knowing that those numbers are going to increase as the weather warms up?
Actually, no. So that correlation is it's a brand new program. It's only been in operation since April, and that graph's actually a little bit old. So if I updated it today, that drop off, and I didn't have January, I put that slide in there a couple weeks ago and didn't really have all the January numbers. So it's a great point, but we have not seen anything to indicate that our infractions are seasonal. Where our guys are finding issues, that might change a little bit. They're inside a little more often, so maybe we're finding people smoking inside instead of outside. But again, with only 6 months of data, we don't yet have anything indicating that this would be a seasonal trend.
Steve, I have one final question for you. How do you anticipate FAA to evaluate airport SMS programs?
Boy, if I knew that, I'd write a book and be retired down here for good. I think the way that I'm positioning our airport to prepare for that is my gut is that the big challenge for the FAA is how to make this scalable. How do they go in and evaluate Denver and then another small airport on the other side of the state? And how is that fair? Make it scalable. So my gut is that they're going to want to see that all 4 of those components are addressed, that you're doing something's in motion. And I think over time, there'll be a long implementation period, and over time they'll probably fine-tune their expectations, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think they'll just want to see that you're addressing those 4 components, and you're going to be able to talk kind of like I did here. How do you promote your effort? Are you sitting back in your office, or are you out there promoting the effort? How are you assuring that people are following the rules? Do you have a program that ensures a safety assurance piece of it? The safety risk assessment. Do you guys proactively go out there and chase hazards and manage risk? Do you have a program? And I don't know if the answer is, you do one a year for that one big construction project and you're good, or you do them for a variety of triggering events like we do, but I think you'll want to address that. And then the safety policy piece is pretty straightforward. You need to have a policy that tells everyone at the airport what safety is all about. It delineates responsibilities, and that piece is very straightforward. So I think that'll be kind of the initial stab, but they'll also want your data to paint a picture. Okay, what are you doing with data? And there's a lot of things out there that can be tracked. It can be how long do hazards stay open on your books? How much money are you spending on hazards? There's all kinds of data out there that we are starting to, and we're just getting our arms around this right now. We need to, though, use that data to paint a picture. And are you making sure that your efforts are driven by that data? We're not out there just chasing things because, hey, this is a neat project we want to work on. You need to be able to say that because of the hazard reports or because of workers' comp costs, there's a lot of things that can drive your efforts that I think that they'll want to make sure that you're doing something with that data.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. On behalf of SWAI, we would like to thank you for coming and speaking over here. And in your name, our donation has been made to Wounded Warrior Project. These are your certificates and stuff. And let's join again to give a round of applause.